Lokati here with the death of the Mask of the Stitched Demon. We are back to pushing our bi-loop Barrier Invocation Infernalist, the limits. We are running a Comet version right now, and we're going to do this T4 Breach, and then we'll go over the POB afterwards. So, Demon Form, Curses, get your loop started. And we are running, instead of Cascade, we are running Cold Penetration. Cold Mastery is also an option, but Cold Mastery is going to increase the number of double casts you get because it's going to affect the mana cost of Comet. So Cold Penetration is just going to be a better choice for us. As always, comets will appear at your cursor location, so make sure you are dropping the comets where the enemies are going to be. Pay attention to your energy shield. We are in a permanent loop, so we can sustain this full time with only hitting our flask about once every second or so. However, there are things that can happen that can push the limits of your recovery. External damage over time effects, ground effects, a big hit from the mob, or just getting shot can have a huge impact on how much damage you're taking. So if you look like your energy shield is starting to take hits too big, you can slow down your cast rate by taking your hand off the button and just tapping it as you go. And if you're not at the point for full sustain, then that is always an option for you. You can always cast it at the rate that you want to cast it. However, when you're holding the button down, it should be casting at tick rate, which is 33 milliseconds, give or take some time for latency. Now we are going to have to compare our actual in-game DPS on this boss versus the estimated DPS in POB, and then adjust the cast speed appropriately for the skill. And so we'll take a look at that as well once we're in POB. You do want to make sure that you keep casting even while you're looting, otherwise you're going to lose your life sustain stack from your damage recoup, and then you'll lose your demon form stacks. So we're going into the fight with about 140-ish stacks. Now we are going to drop Cursed Ground and Frostbomb where he is going. And then drop in the comets. As you can see, a ridiculous amount of damage on the boss. And we lost our Frost Bomb, but all in all, pretty good damage. And a nice little set of wraps to sell. While you're doing it, go ahead and drop our Curse and our Frost Bomb. And then delete them. Now, comets will appear at the location of your cursor. We're not hitting him with every one because of Cascade. You can drop your Frost Bomb and your curse again here. And you can see the damage on it is very, very solid. Alright, let's take a look at our POB on the bi-loop witch. So first things first, you're going to have a couple of different loadouts here. The first one is going to be build entry, which you can start off at level 67, and then all the way up to the current character that I'm playing, which is currently level 92. The first thing we're going to go over is the passive tree. So when you're starting out, it's going to be important that you pick up things like Soul Bloom, Heavy Buffer, Illuminated Crown, and Hallowed. And then move over to Patient Barrier, Meta Energy Gains for Meta Energy Gains here, Eternal Youth for our Flask, Savoring for our Flask charges, Heartstopper to lower the damage we're taking from the Ignites, and then we have Potent Concoctions and Lasting Concoctions here for more Flask charges and stability, and then Oasis for more recovery. This tree will get you started with the build. Now, in order to get the build together, you're still going to have to go and watch my bi-loop video on how to get your loop started. but this is just a general entry into the build of what your tree needs to look like. In addition to that, on the items page, we have some basic shopping list of items here. And so your emeralds are going to need duration and life recovery. Your sapphires are going to need meta skills, energy, and energy shield. And your rubies are going to need to have maximum fire resistance. You're going to need to adjust the number of each of these and the total quantity of your jewels based on what you can achieve and how you can get your loop started. But these will be the jewels that you're looking for. Obviously, the emeralds, you want the highest rolls that you can afford for those. On sapphire, the meta skill gain energy is going to vary based on what you need to get your loop going. And then on your ruby, you're going to want maximum fire res of 2% or 1% possibly if you can't sustain your loop with a 2% ruby. But these are the basic items. On our helm here, obviously maximum energy shield, int, and resistances. We're going to need a ghost ride. A higher max life converted is always better. We're going to need on our gloves more energy shield, stats, and resistances. That's kind of the theme. Energy shield, stats, and resistances. Energy shield, stats, and resistances. On our amulet, we do need a minimum of 43 spirit to get the build going. And run higher spirit and blasphemy instead of Arctic armor. But I think that Arctic armor is a better overall defense because it protects you when you get swarmed rather than preventing the occasional thing from striking you. Sapphire rings, again, we want resistances and stats, and on our belt, it is very, very, very important that it is a fine belt, and it has the maximum roll for flask life recovery rate of either 39 or 40, plus a second flask recovery node that can either be increased flash charges gained or reduced flash charges used. Now, reduced flash charges used is better than increased flash charges gained, but if you already have your loop, it doesn't matter which one you choose, and increased flash charges gained are generally cheaper to get a hold of. You do want to make sure that you do get chaos res. We are not chaos immune, and then max all the remainder of your resistances with your gear. The exact resistances on each gear are not critical. You could use a ruby ring instead of a topaz ring. You could use a prismatic ring instead of a sapphire ring. Just make sure that your resistances are capped. One thing to note, do not get maximum life or maximum mana on any piece of gear. They are bricks to the build, and you need to avoid those at all cost, with the exception of very, very small rolls of max life are not very detrimental. Like on our current character build right here, our belt has 29 max life on it. It doesn't really matter, but 29 max mana could matter. So make sure you get the lowest or no rolls possible for those kind of affixes. The rest of the stuff that's on the gear, most of it is inconsequential or small in effect. And so like on our ring here, I've got 33% increased cold damage. Is that really affecting our damage that much? 2.1 million to 2.1 million. Not a chance. So don't stress too much about the exact additional attributes. Just make sure you have all the bases together. The build functions mostly off of the incredibly high cast rate of Barrier Invocation, combined with a very high sustainability on Demon Form to do all of its damage. And damage from your gear is not as important as getting all of the things necessary to get your loop going is. And so, as you can see, this is my current character. We're running about 2.1 million DPS out of the build. This was calculated in-game based on video DPS, and so you could just inherently play better or do better or RNG better than I did on that one fight, but based on the video, we are doing about 2.1 million DPS. And so we have adjusted the configurations necessary to show that number here. For some reason, our ascendancing node in POB is currently giving us 36 spirit, when in reality it only gives us 10. So that is adjusted down for an accurate measurement of how much spirit we have. We are getting ES from in-game numbers is off a little bit, so I adjusted that so that the ES here is what matches my in-game character. Exposure is not counting from frost bomb, so you can see if we come in here and we turn frost bomb on or off, it does nothing, and we don't have exposure on our configuration screen over here, so I did add exposure down here. Considered casting is also not showing up in the damage from Comet, and so when you turn this on or off, it does nothing. So we have taken and added considered casting in our custom modifier here. If later on considered casting is now calculated properly, we can just delete this line right here. We're estimating damage in Demon Form at 150 stacks. Obviously, it's lower at 0 stacks. It's higher at 300 stacks. This is just kind of a midline of where we landed when we hit the boss. And then our cast rate is what we're doing to adjust our damage to match what it is on the video. And so Barrier Invocation does not have a cast rate or a cast time. Barrier Invocation itself is just a trigger ability and releases instantly, which should mean that it runs at server tick rate, but it doesn't. And so we're using in-game data to confirm the cast rate that we're getting, and it looks like we're getting a cast rate that is similar to this. And so that is a cast per second of about 5.6 casts per second, where we cast 6 comets at a time. So that is in the world of comets per second, 31 comets per second, or 33 comets per second, whatever that is. So a very, very high rate of comets per second based on Barrier Invocation. Now, if you are at a lower investment set in the build, then you may not be able to hold the button down, which means you need to tap the button. And you can always go in and adjust your cast rate so that it is more accurate to the number of comets you're casting per second by just utilizing the time it takes for you to kill a boss minus the boss's HP. Now, versus that boss, we obviously gain demon form stacks, but then we also let Frost Bomb fall off. We're just estimating right now because POB is very, very new for PoE 2, and so not very accurate. It's a tool, we just have to learn how to use the tool. Now, if you have any questions over the build in particular, please drop a comment down below or come by Twitch and ask the question. I am happy to answer questions anytime you want to. Just swing on by and we'll see what we can do to get you squared away. And again, I will have a link below for the buy loop video on how to understand how to hit your loop and how to maximize it and understand the difference between a converging and a diverging loop and all that. But again, if you just need some help putting the build together, please come by and ask. Thank y'all very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Peace.